took the whole year off.
Oh, no. We're in trouble.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to call to order the workshop of March 4th, 2019. First on the agenda, we have an executive session to discuss legal rights and responsibilities pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Hayes and a second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Abstain? Opposed? None being. We're now in executive session by vote of 6-0. No, I'm talking about the ag board.
Whatever works.
Just think they're not gonna do it against it. They're on the air. Now declare this council out of workshop. Next on the agenda is a proposed TIF, tax increment financing, with Brett Sawyer, our city planner, presenting. Mr. Sawyer, good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the board, to the council members here for taking some time to go over this. What I have in front of me is we have proposed TIF District 24, which would be Grace Lawn Apartments. What Grace Lawn Apartments are, they're currently an approved apartment complex that will be on the corner of Grace Lawn Road and Turner Street. You can kind of see it here called out. There are going to be 4 apartment buildings built consisting of 48 market rate 1 and 2 bedroom units. So this is the project that we're looking to create the TIF District for. It's 2.92 acres, and you can kind of see it there called out. What we're looking to do with this proposed TIF district is we're going to capture some funds to make some different infrastructure improvements in the area. We have 2 things really that we're looking to do. We're looking to build some sidewalks on Turner Street that would connect the mall area walkways to the walkways down on Grace Lawn Road. And the other thing that we will do is we're going to accrue some funds for the future repaving of Turner Street and Jolene Drive. Jolene Drive is out behind the movie theater complex. But we have a need for sidewalks in the area. I've got some pictures that I'll show you in just a second here that illustrate that point. But the Auburn Police Department has raised a safety concern for the pedestrians in the area, and the new apartment complex will generate additional pedestrian traffic that will really require the sidewalks to be built. The sidewalks do align with the walkability goals for the city and is supported by the Complete Street Committee. They will want to keep notifications going, but they do like this project. And again, it will connect the mall sidewalk to the future Grace Lawn Road. The other thing that it'll do is retain the funds for the local repaving, and that will just help avoid future issues with funding for some necessary road improvements. You can see called out right here. This is the subject property again. This is Turner Street, where we're going to connect right here. We currently have the sidewalks down in the mall area that end right about out behind, I believe that's the Goodwill store. And so we're connecting this stretch, and then future sidewalks that are in the plan is the Grace Lawn Road that will connect to St. Dom's out that way. So we're really connecting 2 different sidewalks systems, one planned and one currently there. This is a couple images of the current area as illustrated. You can kind of see there's absolutely no room right there. I can testify when I took the pictures that it was fairly sketchy to be out there, to be honest. This is from Grace Lawn Road looking up Turner Street. This is from the Grace Lawn complex, and then this is looking from the Blaney Wellahan property up the street. So this is where the sidewalk would be. One thing that we will use is we will use a CEA, and the reason that we're looking to use a CEA is because TIF funds don't accrue right off the bat, so we would be leveraging the company that is developing the project to use their funds. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Brad, can you explain what a CEA is?
That's a credit enhancement agreement. That is where we have an agreement to pay back, and it can be for a number of different reasons, but this one would be to pay them back. So it was a credit enhancement agreement. So we would use that. We'd use the credit enhancement agreement to repay the cost of construction of the sidewalks plus interest. Once we've repaid, there will be no more CEA. That will be done. It will be just retaining money and accruing that for future road improvements. Based on the estimate, we would be looking at a 10-year payout for that, and the sidewalks would be designed and put to bid by the city, so we would be doing the design in-house, putting the bid out. The tax impacts of the TIF district would be, well, there would be none to the general fund. We would be capturing just the tax shift. So all the money that was going to be going to the general fund from this account would still be going to the general fund. We are just capturing that tax shift, that money that would be lost to the state and county otherwise to do these projects. And the way that breaks out in this particular scenario, it can differ a little bit from project to project, but 43% will be captured, 57% will go directly to the general fund. This is the, you guys should have this in your packet, and you do have it in front of you here. This is the calculation sheet. We've got a 24-year term on this. TIFs can be up to 30 years, but we are capturing 24 years with this proposal, and that is because we are looking at $540,000 to retain, so we've got that total amount down there. You can also see on the side what our estimated CEA repayment would be, so that would be about 10 years. We based that on $150,000 based on the estimate provided by City Public Works. And the total repayment would be approximately $200,000 over the term of that. Does anybody, I guess, have any questions on that particular graphic or that sheet? It's not up on this PowerPoint, but you guys do have in front of you the tax shifts. So again, that's just reiterating that we're really just taking what we'd be losing from revenue sharing, education subsidies, and county taxes, and we're just capturing that money for this project again. And you also have in front of you the project costs. We've got the $202,000, again, that includes the interest, and we have $338,000 for the two different roads that we're looking to capture funds for doing that for. Like to really hammer home a point, I guess. So I've got another one that just says right now 43% would be captured and would be otherwise lost. All right, so we have the timing. What we are looking to do, we are looking to get this going. We've got a couple reasons. We'd like to not just sit on this. So the public hearing would be on April 1st, and we would be looking to do a vote on that day with the 10-day notice before that. Then we would turn around and submit that to the DECD. Meanwhile, there would be the design and the bid of the Turner Street sidewalks. And concurrently, there would be the groundbreaking. They are looking to either be in, they're looking to be in April for the groundbreaking for actually building the apartment complex. They anticipate having 2 buildings complete, roughly half of the total assessed value by April 2020, so that will be the first capture. That will be the first year that we will be capturing any TIF revenues, and that will be the first year that we'll have a CEA agreement. They anticipate somewhere in summer 2020 the apartment complex to be complete, and we would be looking to have the Turner Street sidewalks complete at that point. And then on September 2020 would be the first time that we would be realizing the increased money and then having the CEA payment to them. Does anybody want to have any comments or questions about that?
Not so much about your payments and stuff. Is there enough lighting, and is lighting included in your sidewalk?
There was no lighting detailed in this proposal, so that does not include lighting.
So would that be a safety hazard for people walking at night, especially this time of year?
That is something we could take into consideration. I don't have a definitive answer. I don't know how many of the sidewalks always do have lights. It is a well-used city road, as you guys are well aware of, but this plan does not include that at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh.
This build-out of, that we're looking at, you say 2 buildings are going to be built. Does that reflect only the 2 buildings that we're looking at right now?
Yeah, so the calculation that we had, the first year would be based off of 2 buildings. If you look at the sheet, the spreadsheet, the total improvement would be $2.5 million. The first year, we're looking at $1.5 million, and that's based off of half the project being completed, 2 buildings completed.
So it's going to be 4 buildings in all?
It will be 4 buildings in all. So like I said, so it is a bit of an estimate because it's a phased project. But this is what they kind of estimated at their middle of the road estimate, not quite best case, but not worst case either.
When they build the other 2 buildings, it's going to be a better payoff.
What's that?
When they build the other 2 buildings, it's going to be a better payoff because they won't be capturing money for sidewalks. The sidewalks will already be there.
And I'm sorry, I might be misunderstanding, but once we have the full project completed, the whole project will be captured at that 43% rate. So just for the first year, in my estimate on the spreadsheet here, that is at the 2 buildings completed, and then the rest of it is at 4 buildings completed.
Well, the 2 buildings are going to, didn't you say a credit enhancement agreement to take money out of that to build the sidewalks?
The money will be, and I probably wasn't very clear, but they are going to upfront borrow the money, and then the CEA will be to repay them. So they're funding the sidewalks fully upfront, and this is a payback schedule to the developer.
Yeah, and if I could, on that, it's actually, I'll tell you, I think it's a stroke of genius what you've done, because you've actually created a sticky with the developer. Mm-hmm. If the developer doesn't do the full development,
right,
backs out for whatever reason,
right,
then there is no mechanism for him to get repaid or her to get repaid for the sidewalk improvements that have been done right away. So it is the repayment through the CEA is based upon them actually completing the project, which is great because this assures that they won't back out. Or at least
it incentivizes them to do that. And thank you for that point. That's a great point.
Yeah, incentivized.
Thanks for that clarification.
Solly?
So I'm just curious, you mentioned about Gracelawn Avenue itself. So there are sidewalks planned on Gracelawn Avenue.
There are, yes.
And does any of this affect the actual street itself?
Gracelawn. So I think Michael had some discussion with Dan earlier today. There was some state money, and that has kind of potentially gone away. I don't know the status of that. They are looking at doing the Gracelawn Road project. It is on their radar. I can't speak, unfortunately, definitively to when that project will be completed. And the unfortunate thing about the TIF, again, is the money is not immediately available. So for a project that needs to be immediately done and taken care of, unfortunately, the TIF doesn't necessarily help with a project like that. It needs to be addressed sooner than we can through the TIF.
Will the Gracelawn sidewalks get done, though?
No, that's again
Okay.
a separate project. This is strictly for the Turner Street sidewalks, because that's the only thing that's in this portion of the.
Thank you. And when the Complete Streets came out with their study, they talked about walkability. Did they talk about bikeability along that street?
There was no mention of that I saw. I can reach back out to them.
I would appreciate that because
Okay.
it could be, it's very busy, and when you've got the school there, and
It is.
people might be able to bike up and down that street, which would be really nice.
Okay, yeah, so I can certainly
And
discuss
I
that.
agree with Councilor Gary about the lighting, just to know what the status is of that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, so we can certainly work on addressing both of those issues.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify the Gracelawn Road, because I know there was some conversations regarding that earlier today. So the project to reconstruct Gracelawn was been identified for a number of years now. It was scheduled to be reconstructed in the summer of 2020. Unfortunately, the state ran out of money for the MPI program that's being run, and this year. So it's a 50-50 split with the state, putting in $500,000. So the project's been pushed out a year to 2021. Dan certainly is on top of this. This has a direct impact on our equipment as well at the Public Works, as well as our residents who drive that and have the impact on that road. So it is something that he is pressing forward on, but he shared that information with us earlier.
Thank you.
Is there any questions on the timing of this before we move on to our next agenda item? Council, everybody's good with the timing as outlined? Yeah? Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Next, proposed Agriculture Advisory Board ordinance with City Manager Mr. Creighton presenting. I'm not going to make it.
Protein. Get a long night.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Nice to see you. On the screen is the draft ordinance. I want to thank our Assistant City Manager for preparing this. I spoke about it at the last council meeting in the workshop, spoke about some of the potential powers and duties. This is really more for discussion among the council than it is for me to do a presentation. You've, I think, probably had an opportunity to be able to review the draft. It talks about having 9 members, and the purpose of the Agriculture Advisory Board is to review, monitor, or document agricultural, conservation, residential activity in the Agriculture and Resource Protection Zoning District. You may want to say Agriculture, Resource, and Forestry Protection Zoning District. And then under powers and duties, it gets into what some of the powers and duties may be. Really feel like this is an issue more for the council than it is for me. Councilor Lasagna.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I have a number of issues with this. First off, it feels very boilerplate to me. It doesn't feel like it really reflects the study that was done. A couple things. One, and you mentioned forestry in there. Forestry really needs to be foregrounded in a way that it's not here. And more specifically, and what is the responsibility to forestry, which is different from the others. Number 9 on here talks about coordinated foreign and domestic marketing. That, I'm not sure what that means. That could be a huge responsibility for this board. The other thing is, again, going back to the study, I think we really need to look at that, the study that was done, and look at this again, look at some examples. I know that there's some good examples for these ag commissions from other places, and I didn't have time to look today, but people have made suggestions, and it would be great to sit down with those next to these. And the last thing is developing and supporting value-added activities, and really what the farmers need as much as the land to work on, especially these smaller scale farms, is really robust marketing and markets. And I think that should be a part of this. You mentioned marketing, I can't remember what the words were, products. But I think within this community, within the state, we talk a lot about having Exit 75 and being able to have direct access to Portland in particular, and that is a huge market that we're not, from this, we're not taking advantage of. So I really feel that this should be put side by side with some other ones that are active, that are being actively used. And also, on the other side of this is to look at the study that was done.
Those are all good comments. One thing we could do, we could form a working group with some staff and a couple of councils, if you'd like, to be able to work through this and then come back with a revision.
Can you have a working group with community members?
I'm happy to have a couple of community members involved.
I just think that there's a lot of wealth of knowledge, and I learned being involved in the Mayor's Ag Committee that I didn't really know enough to be able all the time to be able to have really effective input.
I think that's a great idea.
Is there any other comments? I'll make a note on point 3. Shall work with the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the City Council to protect the natural environment. Something for the working group to look at. I don't want to confuse agricultural resource protection zone with conservation. I think we do need to have a pretty strong separation on that because this is not conservation land, this is ag land. So just keep in mind on that one, if we could.
I'd like to comment there. You're saying you'd like to have 9 people on the board. I think that's a little large, my opinion. With just 7 of us as councilors here, we have a hard time to come to agreements. Adding 2 more, we probably never would. So I don't know if I would vote in favor of going with 9. I think 7 is plenty, and 5 might even be enough. I'd like to see things accomplished, not being held up because we can't get people on the same page. And 9 people is a heck of a lot of people to make decisions.
Councilor Walker, I agree that the number's important, but I think the individuals who are on the committee are most important. As I said, thinking about markets and local markets, that's a different expertise than somebody who is a farmer. So I think it's the expertise on the committee, and maybe a smaller group is the way to go.
I guess I go with more because I think in order to get expertise in a lot of areas, more the better. In fact, I think if there's a need for understanding agricultural, farming, finances, and if there's going to be a review of, say, some of these properties that haven't been into farming, if they're coming up with a business plan, it seems to me we need somebody that's in finance or accounting. I think it would be good to have actually where this is new and how they operate in either advisory role or actually making some judgment. Probably an attorney would be wise to have. I guess the manager and I attended the AVCOG meeting Wednesday and last Wednesday, and there's a wealth of, I think, information there and expertise, and especially with the Small Business Administration, and I think, and I've got the lady's name, but it'd be good to have their input too, because they have a lot of expertise with respect to both farming as well as forestry. So I think actually to get the various talents that are needed to look at this, I think that the more, the better.
I tend to agree. It's interesting. I found there are more people with expertise in farming than people that farm in Auburn. So there is a wealth of knowledge out there. And you should get some people that are in marketing, that understand agriculture, that understand marketplace dynamics, economics, and so forth. I'd like to see what the working group has and how we could bring all that together. But there's a lot of interest on this. As evident, I think it was sold out on March 7th. The Farmland Trust, and I have it written down, is having a seminar at the Auburn Senior Center. That's sold out. So there is a lot of interest. So maybe the more is the merrier. But even if the committee is 7 or 8 people or 9, still open and transparent enough that people can be invited in that have special expertise in order to give guidance and so forth.
I think it would make sense to start off with a set number, let's say 7, and then see if the group that forms would like to invite a few extra that they feel are not represented on that particular group. And we may be thinking of a few on our own, but we may not have any idea that there may be a few others who the group would like to add. So I think if we could decide on a certain number of people to start out with and then open it up to the group inviting more if needed. And keeping an odd number.
Yeah. If I may, I also think that the Good Food Council can give some good recommendations. This is the kind of thing that they've been studying for a long time. and have representation from them. But again, I think it's not so much the number, it's who do we need at the table, and it probably means more. So
Yeah, that's
just
what I
like you're
just
thinking
said.
of an effective board, what is the expertise that we need that we may be missing, and to make sure that that is well represented.
Okay, so, Mr. Manager, leave it to you to notify us of potential working group to kind of look through this and discuss this before final presentation. We do have some time. You know, we have probably at least 90 days, probably more like 120 days, before we have to actually have this finalized and go through the whole process. So, yeah, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Last, let me just make sure it's last. Last, we have another executive session to discuss a real estate matter pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Gary and a second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Will now stand in executive session by a vote of 6-0. 30 minutes. I'd like to take the next 20 minutes and talk about any, oh, hello, we're on. For those of you at home, council is now out of executive session. I'd like to take the next 20 minutes and have just a council workshop on topics that are outstanding, that are off the agenda tonight. Namely, I'd like to look at, and I'll start this off with the high school. We do have, I think the last joint meeting we had with the school committee was a little abbreviated, cut short. You know, we were talking and kind of trying to come to consensus and pulling out the no's. Has anybody had any time to reflect or think on that topic? And I'll just open it right up. Don't have to ask permission, just talk. Please. Could you give the council an update? Okay.
Good.
I spoke with the superintendent this afternoon. She called me to give me an update on where she's at in terms of her numbers. She's looking at a way to be able to get to the 15 million that was talked about the other night. And it could be more than that, as the mayor described when he was speaking at that joint workshop with the school committee, with fundraising and the potential of maybe a local option sales tax from the legislature. There would be an opportunity to be able to reduce the cost even further. Certainly the fundraising is something we have more control over in the community. Katie talked to me about instead of putting in funding for other capital items in the CIP for the FY20 budget, having the CIP be devoted to some of the costs regarding the new high school. And she also talked about trying to find a way to be able to reduce costs in addition to that. I was encouraged by the conversation. Katie's coming later to the council meeting. I think she and her team are working on ways to try and accomplish what was talked about the other evening while still delivering a quality new high school. So,
thank you for that update.
Mr. Mayor, I think recognizing that the superintendent is planning to be here this evening, I mean, if we're going to have a discussion, it's not been put on the agenda, might it be a courtesy to at least inform her that this subject is before us right now if she's in-house and wants to.
I know Katie, she's probably listening right now, so.
I didn't realize she was coming in.
Yeah.
I didn't know she was coming until she called me, so.
Yep.
I think that's very good that she is taking the time to do that.
It is, and I do think, as a separate body, though, we can have an open discussion, without the school committee around.
As long as she is listening. I think that it would be helpful if she were here to at least be able to hear the discussion.
We can get in touch with her right now.
Yep.
And I have a comment that whether she's here or not, I think, if you don't mind if I go ahead. I have to say, having been involved in the building committee and a subcommittee and the joint committees, that the school department and the school committee have been working very hard and being very responsive to the community. There are a lot of demands on them, but I have found that each time they're hardworking. Katie in particular, the superintendent, is passionate about this, and I do believe that they are being responsive to the community.
Any other thoughts, comments? Councilor Fournier.
I've been in contact with Dr. Bausman and with Mark Goslin and Scott Anir and a number of people, talking with them on various facets of, the plan, what we're looking at right now in terms of the extras that would be paid for by taxpayer money. I came up with a list of ideas that I had, and I put it forth to the committee, and hoping that that would be taken under consideration as a possible idea. For example, one example is if you need an extra field, can you put that field out at Walton so that we're not, you know, ignoring a field that's been used for years and it's a good field, it's a large field, and that would probably save some of the money in terms of, you know, the field put on the current ELHS property. Put out some information about synthetic turf versus natural turf, so just food for thought so that they could consider that as they meet as a building committee. And that I did ask for a list. I did call Scott Brown, and Scott Brown said that my call was just a few minutes after the superintendent's call, and she was asking for the same thing. And my question was, could we have a list of current schools that have been built, and the costs that they were built at, and the local costs as well as the state costs, and what the percentage was, to see what the percentage is for what local people have paid. And the one thing that I did, of course, they're not all 125,000. 125,000 is the largest amount. The next largest amount is 100,000, 100,500, a million. Sanford for 100.5 million. The local share was 10.58%. A lot of smaller construction projects, they still come out to a percentage. So the lowest percentage paid by any district for the local share was 6.29%, and the highest, only one was this high, and that was the Westbrook Middle School. And of course, that's a whole different demographics, 22.64%. But most of them were around 11.98, 11.36, 10.58, 15.76. And ours is at 13.18 at the time that we had the 16.5 million. That would be the local share. So that kind of gives you an idea. You should be getting this. You should be getting this on your email.
That's an interesting conversation, if I could. I look at those numbers. I think the report. I think there's some variables there, and the superintendent is on our way down too. There are some variables there that need to be kind of looked at that are changing, i.e. the cost of construction, as we know, is going up. Cost of labor has been going up just over the last 12 to 18 months. Those are some realities that have to be taken into consideration. But also what I did when I reviewed that before the meeting, we will have the most expensive and probably the grandest, if you would, high school in the state of Maine. I'm not either advocating for or against that. It's just, I think it's a point that needs to be taken. It also, from a valuation standpoint, and if we're just looking at a local, you know, very hyper Auburn focused, not the state and how the process works. I think I told this to Councilor Forney, if someone offered you a brand new Mercedes for $100,000, but said you only had to pay $15,000, would you buy it? And I'd probably be hard pressed to say no on that one. That's a value. Now, granted, that other $85,000 is coming from someone somewhere. I thought about it over the weekend. That's probably come from me. You know, over the last 20 years of paying into state income tax, you know, I'm actually kind of excited to get that money back into Auburn versus going to wherever it did go. So from a personal standpoint, I think this is, I think we're on the right trajectory, if you would. I think lowering the cost and being smart about what we're getting is smart. I think we're almost there. Now it's just a point of how do we get there and what there is. How do we define that? So. Councilor?
And I appreciate that, and I really appreciate the discussion about mill rate and taxes, but I also want to continue to stress the idea about student performance and how does this building help to enhance student performance, supporting faculty, faculty performance. You know, I know that that's not as tangible as all of these things, but I don't want to lose that part of the conversation as we continue to move forward. Because it's easy to get caught up in the numbers, and it's very meaningful, because it's going to cost people some money. But again, just to keep focusing on student performance, how does this help? For example, having different styles, learning styles, and they're creating spaces to accommodate different learning styles. That's the kind of thing that I think it's important to make sure that we foreground as we're talking about this.
I'd like to respond to that for just a minute. The building does not make the program. Right. It's what goes on inside the building. I don't care what it looks like. And there is a lot of, you know, research out there on what kinds of the climate, how to improve the climate, what makes it conducive for students to learn, and that is true, that the physical plant can be adjusted, but what's the bottom, the basic part of it is what is going on in that building, what are the the expectations, what are the goals, what's the mission and the vision of the school. I've had small schools, average schools. Each one of them was an old school. We had to use the gym for the cafeteria, for major events, for concerts, for everything. My schools were 5-star schools, meaning that in all 5 areas of assessment, we kept going up every single year. It's what we did, it was what the teachers did. And it didn't matter the students that we had, the caliber of students. They come to us just like they are. Parents are giving us the best kids that they have. And we have to take them where they are and bring them from there. So it's what goes on in that building. I don't want people to think that a brand new school, it's going to be a beautiful school too, it's the most expensive in the state, and that doesn't automatically mean that the educational system is going to be like perfect. We have a long way to go with that.
I agree, and that's why I want to hear more about what will go on inside the building.
Thank you.
At the same time, it's pride. And I think, we talk about the students having pride, something new. I think it does improve their whole approach to themselves and to the program they're in. But also the pride of the teachers. I think it lifts their spirits too. And I think particularly at a time when maybe our salary level of our teachers is not quite what it is elsewhere, I think being part of a new facility, and the new features and so forth would help keep some of our teachers that we value highly, and we have good teachers. But I think the combination of giving something students can have pride in, our teachers can have pride in, I think it lifts the spirit, lifts the community.
Mr. Mayor.
Counselor?
Edward Little is a Class A school, and our students go and they visit other schools, and they said, wow, why don't we have something like that? Maybe it's trying to keep up with the Joneses, but whatever, you got to realize that our teachers and our students need the tools that other schools have. And we've been pulled on the carpet saying that we're going to lose our accreditation and whatever. And now we have a chance to get the tools that we need that's going to last several years into the future.
Decades.
And we won't have to worry about coming back and saying, well, you don't have this program. And we won't have to say the excuse, well, we don't have the space for that. And it's going to be a lot less expensive to do it now with the state's help than to do it on our own dime later on. So I think the time is now. We worry about in 2 years the tax bills may go up. We don't know what the evaluation is going to be. We don't know how much the people are going to open up their pocketbooks and make donations. The rich people are going to give, and the poor people are going to give, and the people that can't afford it are going to give, because they know it's important. We've been talking about this for how many years? At least 20, maybe more.
I had a comment from one party, and the party says, we have an opportunity. We can boast, maybe it's just going to be for a year, but we're going to set a new standard. And I think the state kind of realizes that too. They want us to have, for at least a year, the best. We're going to then be target. Everybody else is going to be, or the other communities are going to be wanting to be the best. I think for the state, that in a sense that's good, because I think it lifts the whole state over time. But for us to settle for something even less than the best now, I think we're short-sighted and short-circuiting ourselves.
I just want to look at the best. Sometimes that's a kind of a muddled or gray definition. You know, is 1,200 seats the best or is 1,000 seats the best? I think one could argue that they're both the best. This is from what vantage point you're looking at. I am 100% confident that we will have the best high school in the state of Maine, period. Whether that has 1,000 seats or 1,200 seats in the auditorium, a 6-lane track versus an 8-lane track, or if they can't serve sushi in the concession stand but only hot dogs and hamburgers, I still think it's going to be the best hot dog and hamburger out there. So I think we just look at it from different definitions and look at those variables. I will say, though, we won't be sacrificing much for the intent from 1,200 to 1,000, or from 8 lanes to 6, or a one-turf facility versus 2. I don't think that's much of a sacrifice. I don't think anyone would look at Auburn and say, you know what, we're not going to move here because they only have a 6-lane track. Nah, we're not going to do it. Or they only have a 1,000-seat auditorium but not a 1,200 seat. Those aren't going to be the decision points that a young family or a business look at. It's the process in which we follow, and obviously the overall commitment by the community within the education system itself. And the test results, what goes on inside the school. So I think those are all, valid points. I'd like to ask one point before the superintendent gets here. How do we feel about, just in brief, the money? If she can get it down to a $15 million bond, and there's some sort of quasi, stickiness with $3 million in fundraising goal to offset that over the next 2 to 3 years, are we more inclined to approve this? Councilor Gary? Yes? Yes, okay.
Said amen.
Councilor Young, you're a yes already on this?
Yes.
Yeah. Councilor Walker?
15 million, no.
Offset by fundraising to 12?
No.
Councilor Fournier?
I'd like 15 million offset to 12.
Yeah. Councilor Titus? Yeah, he's in Jamaica.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to see the figures before it's a firm yes on how much fundraising and how much the bottom line
Yeah,
is.
no, I think we're just doing kind of a whip right now.
Kind
Just
of a
really
straw vote.
Just, Councilor? Line.
I'm satisfied for 15 at a minute.
Councilor's line, I think you were adamant before.
15.
Good, yeah. 15 with a $3 million fundraising goal, bring it down to 12. Okay, that's good. Well, we will stand in recess at this point, unless there's something else anybody wants to say. When the superintendent gets in here, we'll open this up during open session for her to give her brief. I think that's important going into the school building committee meeting on Tuesday. Okay, very good. Workshop is adjourned. We'll reconvene at 7 for a regular council meeting.
by the railroad company, right?
Yeah, that calms you down.
She's
Well, who's-
sleepy. Mr. Mayor.
Oh, they are a hard group. They don't consider anything their responsibility, but they're like the
We're
bosses.
live.
We need to get.
I'll now call to order the meeting of March 4th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first of all, on the agenda for tonight, we have 2 consent items. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved?
Second.
Motion from Counselor Gary and a second from Counselor Walker. Show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed?
It was Holly.
Counselor Zani, I'm sorry, the motion. Opposed?
No, I'm of support.
Okay. Consent items, the motion passes 6-0. Next, we have minutes, February 25th, 2019, regular council meeting. Are there any corrections? If none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 25th meeting.
I move we accept the minutes of the meeting.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor Forney and a second from Counselor Walker. Show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, none being. Minutes are accepted, 7-0. Now, on to communications, presentations, and recognition. First, I'm going to go a little out of sequence here. So, I have a proclamation that I would like to read off, so bear with me. Let it be known that Jane Norris of Auburn, Maine, is a resident of distinction due to her many accomplishments, and whereas she graduated Bates College with a degree in economics, and whereas started in the field of banking in 1950, working as a teller at Mechanic Savings Bank, and whereas held many jobs of growing significance, from loan officer to operations officer and vice president, and whereas in 1979 she was appointed chief executive officer of Mechanic Savings Bank, and whereas 3 years later, in 1982, became the first working president of Mechanic Savings Bank, and the first female bank president in the state of Maine. And whereas Mrs. Norris has served her community with distinction, not only in the world of business, but through acts of charity and service in multiple organizations, applying her leadership skills and knowledge of economics to the benefit of others. Now, therefore, I, Jason Levesque, Mayor of the City of Auburn, present the key to the City of Auburn, Maine, to Mrs. Jane Norris. I call upon all of our citizens to join me in honoring her contributions to the city's history and heritage, acknowledging her accomplishments as inspiration to future generations of young women throughout the city for years to come. Thank you. Hello? Okay, so this works. So Mrs. Norris, if you could, love to have you come up. Now, I also want a little side note. Your husband, Mrs. Norris, his first name was?
Leon.
Leon was a fireman in Auburn.
25 years.
25 years. And from what I heard through Gene from Mechanic Savings Bank is he used to really enjoy going to your conferences and hanging out with the other wives. Did? I think that's a great job for him. And I also heard because of him, they actually changed it to the spouses groups, right?
They did.
They did. So your husband is a trendsetter as well. So I would like to thank you on behalf of all the city council and the residents of Auburn for your years of dedicated service to the city. So
I appreciate it very, very much.
thank you. You want to go and do you want to have some pictures here? Can you? Oh, you have a few. Oh, please.
Oh, well, all I wanted to say was that I was very surprised and very happy when I found out that this had been arranged. And I wouldn't be here without the help of Tom and Joanne Campbell. So I'm grateful for everybody who had a part in this and who put it together. Thank you.
Oh, she has a key to the city. Treasure. We'll take care of it.
On TV. Look, you're on TV.
There you are.
That's strikingly handsome bald down. I don't think we told you that this is televised throughout Auburn, did we? So there's a lot of people that saw this at home, I'm sure. Okay, we're going to be moving along. We have another out-of-sequence agenda item. I'd like the superintendent, Ms. Kate Grant. Yeah? Okay, you just looked at me very shockingly.
I didn't know I was up.
Oh, you're up. I want to be respectful of your time. So Superintendent Grandin, if you could, we'd love to have an update from you on the high school process.
Thank you so much. It's okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm in snow day wear. We have had our 8th snow day, but we're on number 7 technically because we gave back the January workshop day. So students are now, last day is June 18th, and for staff it's June 21st. So we're still in the 3rd week, which is good, and hopefully that was our last one, knock on wood. So I understand you were having conversations about the new high school prior to the beginning of the meeting. So just to reiterate, because I think this is important, when you go to vote for the referendum question, you're voting for up to. So if you set it at what I heard was 15 million, and you say up to 15 million will be the bond, then we move forward in 2 years to try to see where is that up to. But we will not exceed bonding the 15 million. So of course we've been working hard on how can we have the vision of the community and be able to afford it. So I did share with the city manager that we're looking at our capital improvement funds, so we'll be discussing that tomorrow night, is how can we leverage our capital improvement dollars to see if we can help reduce the burden on the property taxes. So looking at our capital improvement funds as one source. Also, you know, standing behind the city manager around the sales tax, the local sales option. Our association has put that they are supportive of that bill. So that is being supported by the Superintendent's Association as well. So that is a positive. The other is looking at the fundraising. So if you've gone on our new website, so hopefully you have gone on our website, we do have already one person who came forward that their mom had passed away, and they asked us this week, I should say last week, if we would put up the Naomi Stevens Memorial Fund so that when her obituary ran in the newspaper and online, in lieu of flowers, people can donate to the Memorial Fund. He has been asked to write a little write-up about what the fund is for. He is a biochemist, world-renowned, and so he contacted and said, how fast could we put something up? And so the fundraising has, you know, started in that way. We have plans for fundraising. The key to fundraising is especially those looking at doing big gifts, is what is the commitment of the community, what's the vision, such as the Performing Arts Center, the stadium, things that people feel like, wow, you know, I want to be part of that. And so until we get to the point where we say, yes, this is what we're doing up to 15 million, we can continue to advocate for large gifts to kick off the campaigning. You must start there before you start getting into, well, are we selling seats for the auditorium? That is in the plan, you know, naming rights is in the plan. So we have organization around fundraising, but we need a commitment from the city, from our citizens, that we are going to be building a high school that inspires people to want to raise funds. You remember, it took the library's campaign, where people were working on overtime to raise funds, 5 years to raise $3 million, $3.5 million. So we want to do the same thing the library did, was inspire, why would I give back to my community, give back to my high school, be part of this future vision. So that's what, but I want to assure everyone here, it is part of the stuff I'm doing weekly, working on the fundraising campaign. So I hope that we don't reduce the vision of the project, but that we commit to up to $15 million, while we still look at funding sources to help support bringing down the commitment from our citizens for this project.
Mrs. Grondin, you say up to 15 million. This is down from 16.5 that we were discussing just last week.
Well, that's what I heard all of you saying this evening.
Correct, I know, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Could you tell us how you're achieving those cuts from 16.5 to 15? I did hear you mention potentially shifting some into CIP, so diminishing your already kind of thought out CIP and having some high school assets there. Anything else? Was there any other cuts, tangible cuts, or?
I would say there's not cuts to the project. There's not a reduction in the project. It's how are we going to fund the project in a fiscally responsible way. So looking at the capital improvement dollars, looking at the fundraising, looking at the contingency fund, as you pointed out, Mayor Levac, around the contingency fund being $1.5 million in the project right now. Speaking to Harriman today around those dollars, they expect there will be dollars there. So there may be an opportunity to say, what could those dollars fund with a matching fund fundraiser? And looking at something that doesn't have to be done immediately, like the auditorium, you have to build for the auditorium, right? So you can't say, well, you don't want to go back and say, well, I wish we had added this. No, that's already in the project. But is there an item, such as the second artificial turf, that waits till the very end for the funding? So looking at strategies that way, because you don't want to come back and say in 5 years, oh, we need an artificial turf field, and it's going to cost us 50% more than it would have been if we had done it with the project. So we want to be fiscally smart too, and not say, put this one off and it costs double when we decide to do it years from now. So looking at what do we definitely want funded now that has to be in the plan for the building, and then what can we defer as we look at the contingency fund and the fundraising.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions for the superintendent while we have her here?
I just have one question. When you're looking at the CIP, I remember one of the items was the addition to Park Avenue School. Are you considering that as one of the?
Well, remember when we get capital improvement funds, it's based on a quote. It's almost like the new high school, right? We're doing the best to quote it, to say at the time when we're bidding for the capital improvement, when we put it together for all of you, it's a year delayed. So when we go out to bid, we often have savings from the bid list. And that money is still on our books, earning interest for the city. So it's sitting there. Mm-hmm. And when we had enough to do the Park Avenue, those two classrooms, that's coming from that.
Okay.
Okay. So that's similar to what I'm talking about right now, is looking at our capital improvement funds that have not been allocated, mm-hmm. to say, okay, could we defer that So it stays on the books, earning interest for the city, and then when we need those funds would offset the bond. So that's what the business manager and I have been discussing. We're going to bring that tomorrow night to the building committee, say here, well, it's going to the finance committee tomorrow. We have a finance committee meeting tomorrow. So we'll be discussing the capital improvement funds to say how much could we allocate towards this project, knowing that we could allocate funds in this coming CIP. Last year you allocated $200,000, so we could allocate again to get a certain amount of dollars to offset the bond note in 2 years, and then have a project item such as the artificial turf field, which is about $600,000, and say, okay, that doesn't have to go in till the end, because remember, the students will move into the building while we're doing the fields. So that's still 3 years, 4 years out. So by then, we will know approximately what the contingency may be and how we've done in fundraising, and can we match those funds to get that at the end. So that's what I envision going forward tomorrow night with the building committee.
Right. Okay,
Thank you.
Any other questions for the superintendent?
I will be in the audience if you think of something.
We'll call on you if we do.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming in on a snow day.
Oh, well, I worked today. I went home at 5:30 thinking I could grab dinner and come back, and then I heard, no, you're due. So
Okay, you're almost to the finish line.
Yes,
almost
exactly.
to the finish line. Moving along, next agenda item, communication. Finance Department, Ms. Jill Eastman, our Finance Director, will be presenting to the council, giving an update.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. I'd like to just give you a brief update on the Finance Department. The Finance Department is made up of 4 divisions. There's the Tax Department, the Assessing Department, Tax Collection, Assessing, Accounting, and Facilities. I'm going to talk to you about the tax collection and accounting tonight. Assessing's already given a separate presentation, as has Facilities. The tax collection department is geared up right now for second half of property taxes, which are due next Friday. So their mail's coming in heavily right now, so they're pretty busy with that. And if you haven't been to our office lately, you haven't noticed that we are doing some cross-training with the clerks in the city clerk's office. And so now we have, at all times, unless someone's on vacation, we have 4 people working out front when you come into the lobby, instead of the town clerk's office being separate. So all the people between tax collection and town clerk will know how to do everything that needs to be done, be it vitals, voter registration, car registrations, taxes. So they're all learning each other's jobs so that we have a one-stop shop in there now. And we're taking turns doing the switchboard. So they're switching out. So they're all, and they're actually all seem very excited about it. They're learning new things, and they seem to be enjoying it. So we're doing it as a trial right now to see how it's going to work. But it's been going on for about 3 weeks, and I think it's going very well, actually. And in the accounting side of things, we are pretty much governed by the calendar. We have certain deadlines every week, every month, every quarter, and the end of each calendar year and the end of the fiscal year. We just completed in January all the W-2s and 1099s. We're now almost done with the first quarter of 2019, which seems pretty impossible to me, but time just flies. And I've been working on the budget, pulling that together and working with the city manager, assistant city manager, and we'll be bringing that to you shortly. So other than that, if you had questions of me, I'd gladly answer. You get to see me every council meeting, so.
Well, so the next time you present, I'd like you to bring maybe a large bag filled with money for some dramatic effect, the optics of it. Just put it down on the table. You don't have to give it away. Just put it down. Is there any questions for the council?
Did we schedule this when Councilor Titus was away?
It's only a coincidence.
No, not really. I didn't know he was going to be on.
No, I think it's important that we just get this orientation on exactly what your department entails too. It's not just counting the money and spending it. So I'd like to see a further kind of review maybe in the next couple of months after budget season of how the cross-training is coming within your department and what kind of tangible effects that's having. If we can quantify that through either cost savings or just better efficiency and better service, it'd be interesting to see how that's working after it's all implemented. Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Eastman? Not being, thank you. We're going to be moving on now. I'm going to open it up. I will open up the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on this agenda. I would ask you to state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Larry Pelletier, 129 2nd Street. Early this evening, we had a gentleman talking about new sidewalks on Grace Lawn, and also the word walkability was spoken. And a lot of you know that I'm an avid walker. I've been walking since 1990 in this city. Walked back and forth to work till I retired, and it's still, as long as God will let me, I'll continue to walk. I love to walk. I find it's very peaceful. It's good for my physical health as well as my mental health. And the reason I'm saying all of this because what came to my mind when I was sitting there thinking about it, I sit on the Complete Streets Committee, and the word walkability, that means several things. In this city, it's very challenging because, and especially in New Auburn, if you've ever been there, you know that since the big fire at 33, some sidewalks go nowhere. Other sidewalks don't exist at all. Just what happened after the city was brutalized, and so it's very important that we maintain our sidewalks. So I'm thinking we're going to be putting new sidewalks, but can we maintain them? Right now, no fault of anybody at Public Works, absolutely not. I'm an avid fan of those folks, and I'm in contact with them all the time. If I see something that isn't right, I'll let them know, and Angela at Public Works will produce a work order and get it resolved. But there's only so much they can do. So before you think of adding another sidewalk, because a lot of our sidewalks need to be replaced or need some serious work on them. A lot of them have heaved up over the years from the old elm trees. The roots get under them and lift them up, and it's very challenging for these folks that have to maintain them. It's especially this time of year to plow, even get through the sidewalk. You have people that plow the driveways and close off the ends of the sidewalk on both sides. You have folks that do the same thing where we have a laundromat in New Auburn. There's a constant problem with the snow being pushed up against the button for the crosswalk, so that has to be addressed every snowstorm. So it's a real challenge. So I just ask that find a way to maintain those sidewalks for folks like myself. And there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us. If you've ever noticed that people walking, some of them have to go to work, and it doesn't matter if it's storming or not. So what choice do they have but to walk in the road? Friday, I was going up Union Street bypass, and with two folks on the left side of me walking in the road. There was a young lady on the right, on the side that I was headed towards Center Street. She was pushing a baby stroller in the street. So I called Public Works, and they said, I'll do a work order. But at that point, it's too late.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Pelletier. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak?
Hello, I'm Mary Sylvester. I live at 208 Maple Hill Road, and I'd like to speak a bit about the fundraising for the high school and endorse the process that's underway now. I respect the work that everyone is doing, both council and school board, superintendent and her staff for sure, in being very clear about the costs that are needed. I am myself a little astonished to find I'm old enough now to be retired, and I can relate to the concerns of everyone who, when we move out of our working years into retirement years, our income becomes fixed in a different way. That said, I believe that it's important for our community and it's important for the future generations here that we have both the programs and the buildings that will be the foundation for good education and inspiring to us all. When it comes to philanthropy and the fundraising for this school, I can speak now as a retiree, but I retired from actually doing strategic fundraising and strategic planning and community planning for community projects. And I built a career on public-private partnerships for projects not dissimilar from ours here, and worked, in fact, amongst others, on a high school elsewhere in the state. A key, of course, is the major gifts that Katie, or the superintendent, is speaking of, in addition to the broad-based gifts where every one of us will have a chance to make our gifts. To attract the largest gifts that will be needed to reach a goal as ambitious as $3 million, we'll want to be sure that it is, in fact, an exciting project where everyone can understand how this makes a difference. And I think the language around the bond that could be not to exceed 15 million is the kind of language that says I can make a difference in creating this project as well as containing the costs for the community. And we don't want to forget that those who will be considering the largest gifts will want to have their name on something. It is a funny thing about us humans is that very often people like to have, whether it's their name on a brick or their name on a seat in the auditorium or their name on the auditorium or their name on a field. I've seen donors want to be very particular about these matters, and those need to be special so that they're proud to have their name on it. So I think you're all on the right track, and I think the project is moving forward in a way that we can all have confidence in and pride. And while we're being careful around the costs, I hope we'll remember that this is a project that you'd only get to do once per generation. We do want to do it well and be proud and have donors be proud as well as our community to have our names on it. So thanks for your hard work.
Now, are you going to be involved in some of these fundraising efforts, Mrs. Sylvester? Without putting you on the spot, which I am.
The key word here is retired for me, but I have had the opportunity to talk with the superintendent once in a while along with some other people, and I will be a donor.
Well, if you are involved outside of just being a donor, I promise you this. I will sponsor the naming rights for the first floor bathroom closest to the office, because I think that's fitting, but only if you're more involved in fundraising.
Well, I will
so think
take
about that
up with the
Levesque latrine, the Mayor Levesque latrine.
Hey, that is an offer not everyone gets every day.
It's not. Put that aside for me. Yeah. Is there anybody, right there, public. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak right now? None being, we're going to be moving on. I'll now close this open session. Under unfinished business, we have a proposed ordinance 01-022 52019, amending chapter 60, section 60-145, special exemption use regulation. This is a second reading. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Hayes and a second from Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to the public for public comment. None being, I'll bring it back to the council for debate. This is a second reading. The first reading, if you remember correctly from, I think it was just last week, did fail. The vote eludes me, though, at this point. Is there any other comment from the council on this? No? I'll ask the clerk for a roll call, then.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Young?
No.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna?
No.
Counselor Hayes?
No.
Counselor Fournier?
Yes.
And the mayor?
Gee, God, you guys put me on the spot. What's a no? Mayor votes no.
Okay.
Broke a tie. Okay, so I get to call that. This is so rare for me to actually have a say in these things, for all those people in public who think I have power. Motion fails by a vote of 4-3. New business. We have an order authorizing the purchase of the used pro deck flooring for the Norway Savings Bank Arena. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Gary. I'm going to open it up to this public for public comment at this time. None being, bring it back to the council for debate. Any debate, any questions? If I remember correctly, Mr. Manager, this is $24,000 for used, barely, gently used flooring for Norway Savings Bank.
Correct.
Versus, I think last year in the CIP, it was about $125,000. So significant savings. Is there any other comment? None being, I'll ask for a vote. Show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstained, none being. Motion carries 6-0. Okay, moving on. We have an order approving the Mill and Main Street intersection design as recommended by staff. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Fournier, second from Councilor Walker. Open up to the public for public comment at this time. Is there any public comment? And again, please just state your name and address. Thank you.
David Doss, 104 4th Street. I'm also a member of the Complete Streets Committee, and I gather they made their recommendation based on their best practices last week in workshop. Larry Pelletier and I didn't coordinate this, but I appreciate Larry bringing up the comment about walkability of Auburn. As is Larry, I enjoy, as is Larry, I'm also a pedestrian in Auburn. And the Mill and Main intersection is a very challenging one for a pedestrian as it is now, and I'm just not sure that signalizing the exit would help in any way. It was almost like central casting this evening as I was walking over, crossing from the Vincent block to the other side of Mill Street. There was someone who's beating the light, coming through a rapid rate, coming from downtown Auburn the other way. Somebody who doesn't pay attention to no turn on red, and there are 3 or 4 cars heading towards downtown Auburn around the corner there. And then finally someone who, instead of using a stop line, uses the crosswalk as their stop line. So for a pedestrian trying to cross, there's no crosswalk, so you go around, and you end up actually in the exit way to Rowley's. And even if there weren't someone in the crosswalk, given the way the snow is plowed, it's a challenge. You're automatically just sort of funneled into the entryway there. Now, I'd like to think that signalization of that exit would work, but I'm not sure it would. I'm not sure if it just wouldn't encourage the same behaviors we see on a regular basis on the street, whether it's trying to beat the light, not paying attention to the light, stopping, but stopping over the crosswalk, which in this case is actually crossing over the sidewalk, and then people would have to go around some way. And then taking a right on red, which is, as a pedestrian, the most dangerous thing that happens in the city on a daily basis, is motorists taking a right on red without looking for a pedestrian who's coming with right-of-way. And if you're walking along that sidewalk and there's that curve there coming across the bridge or going across the bridge the other way, that could be a real challenge. And I've lived in New Auburn for over 28 years, probably not as long as most people in New Auburn, but still a significant time. Very excited about the plans for New Auburn. I remember meetings in the Boys and Girls Club with preliminary sketches, really great stuff going on. And part of that plan is walkability, and have a nice circuit going off to the riverside, using all those new developments that are coming in as part of a walking and sort of a family sort of recreation area. And once again, I have, I don't envy you your position here, having been on the other side on a different committee, but I'm just not sure that a signal there is going to help any. And I think that intersection really does need significant help. and especially with what the future for New Auburn holds, how that plays into what the general plan for New Auburn is. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak tonight? None being, I'm going to bring back to the council for debate. Just to clarify, a yes vote on this would actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Manager, a yes vote would put the signal in place. Correct? Okay, correct. A no vote would go and revert to the plan as adopted by the Safe Streets Committee.
Complete Streets.
Complete Streets, thank you. So, with that said, debate. Councilor Hayes.
First, just a question. In the information provided, discussion goes first option preferred by staff, consultant, MDOT, incomplete streets. Who's the consultant and who was a consulting to?
Goro Palmer was the consultant on this.
To
the city? Yeah.
Okay. I guess just to follow that up, I will be voting no. And I guess I do that recognizing, I guess, a couple of things. One, first option was preferred by 4. I read second option being supported, but I guess supported is different than being preferred. I do see this as a safety item, and I think Complete Streets has documented the reasons that does affect safety. And I think we've heard from the audience tonight the same. I think when this first appeared, I said just common sense should prevail, and that it doesn't really make sense when exiting onto a side street, and that side street then exiting onto the main street is, to me, it is much safer. So I guess for those reasons, I cannot support this.
Councilor Lasagna?
I'll be voting no on this as well, and I think that Mr. Das's description of his experience, actual experience with this, I also, and not representing New Auburn, have heard from a number of people saying they should have created a sidewalk across that a long time ago. People even speaking about waiting to get into the restaurant, and sometimes you're outside there and there are cars going in and out of that exit, and it being dangerous if you're a patron, even if you use Raleigh's a lot. I believe strongly in the walkability of these cities. I believe strongly in what the Complete Streets recommends, and I think we need to look at it as a whole piece, not just this one business and what their needs are, but as a whole piece of making that a walkable, part of the walkable city that will then eventually connect to Auburn itself. And I think it's really important that we think of the whole community and not just one business.
Anybody else? Comments? Councilor Walker?
Thank you. Going back, I don't know, 6 months ago it seems like, but maybe it's only 3. We talked with the developer of this plan. We talked with people that would go see the state, which was part of our engineering group down here. We've talked to everybody. The first thing was plan coming off from 2nd Street. Some of you that have been around a long time, that street was named Pulsifer many years ago, changed to 2nd Street, which runs down along in front of the parking lot. It rolls down around the club and back out onto Broad Street. Talking to everybody, we wanted to see the light actually move there, and the owners of Rowley's at that point said, we'll have no problem giving up that exit coming out of our parking lot if you'll make that light at 2nd Street work so our people can get in and out without being blocked, is like they're blocked all the time. You're blocked all the time trying to turn in or out of that place from 2nd Street onto Mill Street. The state, I guess, is who they talked to, said DOT said, well, we can't put a light there, it'll interrupt the other light too much. Well, personally, I think that's baloney. It's maybe a different cost involved to do that, but that would be the safest way overall, and they chose not to go that way. As far as going on a red light, turning right, you cannot do that in front of Rollies. There is no right turn on red. So if you've walked New Auburn all these years, we ought to know that you can't turn right on red there. People may sneak through there, they're not supposed to. The danger, the real danger is the second crosswalk, not the first one by Rollies. You're sneaking out of Rollies parking lot in front of that crosswalk, not behind it where you'll run over people. That curb is out 10 feet further than the curb that's in front of Rollies parking lot. Once you go around the curve, if you're lucky enough to get around it, you have people standing there to walk across the street. You can't tell if they're going to stop, run over you, or whatever it is. That is the danger that we face here, and we've got this so-called ped cross, whatever you want to call them. Them are the kind of things they ought to work on, not trying to defeat somebody that has had a business there for all these years, no problems coming in and out until the city decided they want to change the way things are done in New Auburn. And if you haven't seen the whole plan, you don't even know what is being widened, what is being narrowed, what the crosswalk is going to look like. How many of you sitting here have seen the master plan for New Auburn and what's going to be done at that straight light? 2, 3, counting the mayor.
Thanks for counting me.
Great job. Great job for people that are going to vote on this. Really, great job.
Okay. Is there any more comments? None being, bring this down to a vote. So again, yes vote is for the signal, the revised plan as approved by city staff. No is for no. So all those in favor? 2, 3. All those opposed? Wow, it's a record tonight. I will cast a deciding vote as a yes vote. The motion carries by a vote of 4-3. Now for the vote, we have an order authorizing the sale of tax-acquired properties by sealed bid for Court Street and Beck Avenue. I will entertain a motion.
I move we accept this one with happiness.
Second.
Motion for Councilor Fournier, second for Councilor Walker. Open up to the public for public comment. None being, bring it back to the council for debate. Any debate on this? We've workshopped this before. Good program? Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask for a vote. Show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? None being, order passes 6-0. We now have a proposed ordinance adopting the Age-Friendly Community Committee Ordinance. This is a public hearing and first reading. I will entertain a motion.
So moved. Oops, sorry.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Fournier, second from Councilor Walker. Open up to the public for public comment. None being, bring it back to the council for debate. Is there any debate?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor.
This was brought up previously on the note here, number 2, to conduct impact evaluations and analyze the effectiveness of age-friendly programs. I still have a lot of questions about the capacity of the age-friendly committee to do this, and is this something that they want to take on?
Already begun doing it.
I don't know.
Councilor?
That work has already begun in terms of fielding out what people are looking for. The work has been done on the survey, but the survey is not completed. But work is in progress right now. And it's being done by the committee, with leadership. Belinda and
I appreciate that. I think that doing that kind of work well takes a lot of time and potential expertise to really get the kind of information that you want. And is that something that the committee wants to do?
I don't think the committee is looking to spend money by hiring a consultant to do that kind of thing, because we do a lot of hiring of consultants. I believe that we can get started by using the framework given to us by AARP as a way to get moving, to start with our building blocks. We have a long way to go. if we were to hire a consultant to come in and start the whole process again, we'll be revisiting areas that's already been done, it's already been fleshed out. As I said, it needs to be streamlined a little bit, but in looking at that document, there's a lot of information there that we'll be getting from anyone who fills it out, and putting it together, collating that, we'll be able to see what people are looking for, what their wants and needs are. I think it can be done as it has been begun. I think it makes sense to do that. I think we'll get what we need, and we can refine it further down the road.
Well, and I really appreciate that this is a goal that you want to do, and also that AARP may have tools and instruments to be able to help. Thank you.
They do.
Any other debate? No? Before take the vote, I'd just say that it's been a little over a year since we formed the Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee on this, and
a lot of meetings.
I think it's a really good example of a good process, one that had a short period of time and has some tangible results. So, with that being said, I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor, or excuse me, point of order on myself, I'm going to ask the clerk for a roll call vote.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Young?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna?
Yes.
Counselor Hayes?
Yes.
Counselor Fournier?
Yes.
Nothing for me to break this time. I thought I was going to do 3 in a night.
Gee. Surprise, surprise.
Ordinance passes by a vote of 6-0. We now have a resolve supporting the formation of the Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee on Water Quality. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept.
Second.
A motion from Councilor Walker, a second from Councilor Fournier. Open up to the public for public comment. Is there anybody in the public who'd like to comment on this? None being, I'll bring it back to the council for debate. Any conversation?
Actually, I don't get a lot of comment from the public on a lot of issues. This issue, I did. I guess even under information, I'm a little concerned in the way it's written. And it immediately goes to address the feasibility and advantages of building a water filtration plant. And then questions maybe the ability of current programs and efforts to maintain the existing waiver. I think that suggests kind of an opinion right up front and maybe towards the intent. And I think looking at the composition as was suggested, I think some real question, and I guess, and I think we all saw it as an email that came to councilors. The comp plan mentions the #1 goal, maintain the filtration waiver. And it goes, it's suggested too, maybe the wording should be, what is the best way to ensure high quality drinking water? In allowing more residents more recreational opportunities, perhaps. But one comment was that, and it has been an undercurrent of suggestion that we want to encourage more residential development, maybe high-end with access, overlooking the water, on the water, so forth. But I think it's recognized by some that the more building of residential properties on water actually curtails maybe greater access to that public body. So I cannot support this ad hoc committee as provided by the information, also looking at the composition of the committee itself.
And just if I could point, the comp plan is very clear about maintaining the waiver, though the maintenance of the waiver is beyond the city's control, and that hence lies the problem. There's other municipalities within the watershed that are directly, potentially affecting the quality of the water, Turner, Minot, that our comp plan, they don't really read it or pay attention to it, hence probably the issue. So I think when we look at this, yes, I agree with you. It's like, is a counter purpose on some of this, but if you really think about it and boil it down to its simplest common denominator, This is a group of people who can work with staff support and look at all eventualities, just all potential of what's out there. How do we keep the waiver? Who can we talk with? Can we talk with people from other parts of the state, or other parts of the country, in academia, and bring all that knowledge back to this council to look at? Because right now we have a quasi-municipal agency within the Auburn Water Department that isn't really responsible to the council. So this is a way for us to kind of really gather all the information that's been studied, been collected to date, and collect some different data points and look at the most modern aspects of cleaning and making the supply more aesthetically pleasing. So I think an open mind, and nothing could ever happen, no decisions could ever be made, obviously without recommendations coming through to back to this council. So just kind of it's different, it's limited in scope, it's limited in time, and I think the people that actually applied and, that requested to be on this bring a wealth of knowledge from a lot of different industry. So, Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You hit the nail on the head what I was going to bring up. You said there's other municipalities in the watershed that have water coming into our drinking water. I think for me to have supported this more was us going into looking at how their water, as it comes into our lake, affects our water. I don't even know for at all if it's tested or if our water department now monitors, tests each individual stream that comes into Lake Auburn.
They do. They do.
And do they, I mean, I've never heard a report saying.
I attended a water trustee meeting last month. And their minutes, everything's open and public, and their minutes are published on the water side. It's very interesting. They're testing. They're seeing where high phosphorus loads are coming into the lake, North Basin being one of those entry points. Okay, the watershed for North Basin is inclusive of Turner and Minot. Then that affects our lake. You know, all this is information they can study and gather. But really, when we're looking at protecting the lake, or let me backtrack a little. How can we have just a body of people whose job it is to think outside of the political boundaries or box that we currently and usually put ourselves into? And just to have some good dialogue and conversation, to pick up the phone and call people, to start researching and collecting data and then report back to us. Sometimes that work group is important. This is not an area of expertise on my end, okay, by any means. That's why I'm hoping that Councilor Titus will take the lead on this with the support of the rest of the Auburn delegation and really start, or members of the committee, and really start working this issue. But, you know, there's a lot of governing bodies that have these groups that just really think about the absurd, really the sublime to the absurd, and put it all together and to see what actually could work. You know, that's kind of this concept. And I think by not doing something would actually probably deny us the ability for creative thought, especially in something where the science is changing so rapidly. So,
Mr. Mayor, I have to say, I don't know if having this committee is the right way to go about this. I think that research needs to be done about what would a filtration system cost and really get some specifics. We've had some numbers thrown around that, to me, don't feel meaningful. And I think that that can be done without a committee. In looking at members of the committee, I don't feel that it's an objective committee. And I think that
objective in which way? Objective to whom?
Well, I'm looking at the way this is even worded, and it often talks about development in here. And to me, that feels skewed towards that's sort of a given, one of the things we're going to focus on.
No, it shouldn't, because remember, this is just like strategic planning. Everything comes back to the council. It's not skewed or biased per se, but you have to look at everything, and you can't just hide something and not decide not to look at it.
Well, I think to me this does focus on that in a way that I can't support this. The other thing, it's come to my attention that there is a state statute from the Public Utilities Commission that they will not authorize a utility to sell property if it would be used for purposes other than for which it was originally intended.
Okay.
So,
I'm not sure if that has any bearing.
Well, I think it does, because it wouldn't allow us to change the use of this property.
I don't think anyone's talking about changing a use of property.
If you're going to sell it.
But again, you're jumping 4 steps ahead, Councilor. They're jumping 4 steps ahead. First, can we just look at what New Hampshire's doing? Or how about this? Why is Connecticut, it's state law, it's illegal to have a waiver from the EPA to clean your water? Or excuse me, it's illegal to have a filtration waiver. And Connecticut. In Rhode Island, there are no municipalities with waivers. In Massachusetts, there's 7. In Maine, there's 5. In New Hampshire, there's 3. And there's 1 in Vermont. 1. These are number of communities with waivers. We should probably look at that. We should probably look at why some of the best tasting acidic water in the country is coming from Washington, D.C., which surface pulls and filters their water from the Potomac River, which I wouldn't put my toe in, even if you told me I could, which I think you can. I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at. Now, what group is best to look at that? I tell you right now, it's not the Auburn Water Department. They have shown a complete lack of desire to look at this for reasons that I have no idea, frankly. There are still data points and studies that they said they've completed that we don't have copies of, that we haven't seen. So why continue down that road of banging your head against the, the wall, so to speak, of a quasi-municipal organization that doesn't have we don't have the authority or jurisdiction over? In other words, let's think outside the box. Now, if we want to get a group of people that want to come together as citizens under this with staff support, this is a good mechanism to do so, okay? It's a great mechanism to do so. This is what smart governance is all about. It's also what smart business is all about, too, if you want to draw that comparison, okay? Looking outside the normal stream of operations and looking at things differently is what breeds success. So I would hope you change your mind on this and not look at it in politically motivated lenses, but actually just letting a group of people say, hey, you know what? You're citizens of the city. Go for it. Dig, and see what you can find.
We can always start in demanding that we look at those previous studies that have been done, because that's what this group ostensibly would do.
Demanding by how? How do we demand something that we have no control over? We've asked. I've asked. Peter, have you asked? Have we gotten anything?
No, I don't have anything.
So why wouldn't you receive a report if this is a long-standing committee, the water department, and I was just speaking with somebody today, describing to me what they're preparing to do to put in a system and use a specific chemical to start cleaning up the water, and
Algicide. Oh, excuse me, the aluminum treatment.
yeah.
It's aluminum. It's an aluminum treatment
Yes.
that binds with the
Metal,
phosphorus and really just holds it down to the bottom until the lake turns over.
Right. So
It's
why,
a temporary treatment, too.
temporary. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. We've got this, the water district the water is owned by both Lewiston and Auburn, correct?
The Auburn Water Department is the Auburn Water Department District, and the Lewiston Water Department is that. They
But
share
we're
capital
both
costs,
of the same
50/50,
water.
but they pay for usage. Lewiston currently uses 2/3 of the water, Auburn 1/3.
So is the idea that we would be financially bound to take care of
We have no
filtering the
idea.
water
We have
and
no
then-
idea. And we're running ahead if we think about this, oh, it's going to be 40 million. We don't know. We don't know. There's other places in the country that are cleaning their water for fractions of that cost. We have to dig. We've been told one thing, but we haven't had the backing. And if the council and your individual wisdoms want to just say, yeah, we'll take that number at face value, by God, we should have approved a $23 million bond for the school department instead of having all those workshops. It's the same concept, but no, we dug into it. But not digging into the water department's, non-substantiated $40 million claim on filtration. And filtration might not be the answer, frankly. We might be something else. We might have to do drilled wells. We might be cheaper off buying our water from Poland Spring. Who knows? Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since you were saying that you've asked for information and they haven't brought any back to you, when our constituents want information, they usually have to file a Freedom of Information request. Couldn't we do that as well?
We could, but it's just not. I mean, if you think about it, we're all supposed to be working together in the same sandbox. I mean, we could do that, but shouldn't we just be working together because it's the right thing to do and not because one's forced? But yes, that's possible.
Well, I'm considering tabling this tonight and suggesting that we ask again and ask Mr. Hazelton to come to us with all that information and present it to us. So it becomes part, you're going to be looking for that information anyway as part of the committee.
Well, then, if we do that, and let's say he brings a study that's 8 years old, showing...
The motion.
I mean, did you make a motion, or you suggested? Are you making a motion to table?
Move to table.
Second the motion.
I have a second.
Point of
All
order.
those in favor of tabling?
Point of order. To a date certain.
To a date certain, which would be the 11th of March.
The 18th is our regular meeting.
Okay, March 18th.
Is that part of
That's
your
acceptable.
Okay. I have a motion to table to March 18th. I have a second motion. All those in favor of tabling? 5. Opposed? 1. Vote 5-1. This motion is tabled to March 18th. Yeah, moving on. Adam Lee wins. Good job. Politics is full effect. Open up to the next, excuse me. We're going to go on to reports. Mayor's report. Got some great news. First of all, Lewiston and Auburn and LA Arts was a recipient of a $75,000 matching grant for art, specifically art in the gateways of both Lewiston and Auburn. I was asked to appoint 3 people, residents of Auburn, to be on that work group. I appointed Sean Rice, who's I think, Director of Fine Arts at Edward Little, or the entire Auburn School Department, one of the two. Bill Lowe, the curator of the Bates Art Gallery, and Sabrina Best will be the staff representative representing the city staff on this. So we should expect reports over the next coming months on, what kind of concepts they're having for gateway pieces of art, something that should be monumental. So keep on the lookout for that. Other than that, from a report, that is all I have at this point. So we'll move it on to the counselor. We'll start with Counselor Young.
Yes, the New England track meet was held in Boston. It was delayed a few hours. They had a snowstorm down there. The New England Principals Association used a, what do you call it? It was a media type of outlet, but it wasn't professional, but it was good. It was streamed over YouTube, and it was done by BayStateRunning.com, and I was able to watch Edward Little, the 3 girls there, and they did. One of them came in second in a heat. That was pretty exciting. They couldn't pronounce her last name though. They ended up just calling her by her first name because they couldn't get around the French names, and that was a problem, I guess. And they would in our high schools in Maine, they couldn't pronounce some of them, and they called them Cheverus. They couldn't say Cheverus, Maine. They said something else. I wasn't quite sure, but I looked at the jerseys and I knew who was there, so I figured out who was running, and they had instant chat, and I was planning on going down, but when they switched it from morning to afternoon, and I not knowing just exactly where I'd park, I decided to change my plans. But I said they said they would more than glad to have me come down next year and help them out, because they had Vermont there, they had Rhode Island, they had Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and they were all taking care of the media, and they were doing the play-by-play, and they were saying they were up in the media booth, but their media booth was just the top step of the bleachers. I don't know who they're fooling, but it went from, and if you want to watch it, you can. It's on. You can go to either mainrunningphotos.com or you can go to BayStateRunning.com, and you can watch the field events and you can run the running events because they had enough cameras on in both setups. And that's all I have to report at this time.
Councilor Walker?
Yes, just one report there. Walton School and Sherwood Heights, with the United New Auburn Association, has a chowder and chili contest, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I believe the time is. So come to Walton and judge our chili and chowder that day, 4 to 6, March 16th. That's a Saturday. Thank you.
Councilor Forney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last school committee meeting, Superintendent Grondin presented the original paperwork for our budget process, which began on February 27th, and she showed us what the budget drivers are. And one main piece would be the salaries and benefits, and they're up by $2 million from last year, correct? And the anticipated health insurance rate has an increase of 12%, but she hopes that this will come down, and as the insurance company tracks usage and stuff, that this possibly will be coming down. One thing that was specifically talking about teaching positions, there were additional teaching positions that have been listed for as a necessary need. New teachers and ed tech positions, Park Avenue, an ELL, English language teacher, Walton, a math interventionist, behavior ed and ed tech 3, Auburn Middle School, an interventionist, which is an ed tech that could be used in various ways, very flexible usage, and it works well. Edward Little High School, they're requesting a computer science teacher and substance misuse counselor, and the total is $645,000, 302. And shifts from SIG to general fund is going to be used to fund a math coach in Washburn School and 2 educational technicians, and that totals to $187,260. One thing that was very exciting for me and asking for is for us to take a look at our special needs or hire more expensive special needs students and try to bring them back to Auburn. And the special ed director has been working with the superintendent to make this happen. And currently there are 37 students at Margaret Murphy. Main Care, let me see, Main Care, $50,000. That have Main Care, it's $50,000 for their cost, and without Main Care, it's $104,000 to $120,000. So it's really expensive. That's per pupil. This is the cost per pupil. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much money we're talking about. Last year, there were 8 students. 8 incoming kindergarten students at a cost of $288,000, right? $383. Of those placements, 7 of those placements were children with autism. This year, there are 18 to 19 placed students. There are 4 incoming kindergarten students with autism at an estimated cost of $260,763. So as you can see, when you look at the per pupil cost, whether or not they have Main Care, that makes a big difference, but they still need the services. So the opportunity that the special ed director was talking about was to create an autism program for pre-kindergarten students, this is age 4, through 3rd grade. I think that's awesome. To become a CDS, Child Development Services placement for 4-year-old students within the community who meet the program criteria. And this will expand, of course, and it'll allow time for it to get formulated as time goes by to refine it, because it does, starting small is what I always support, because then you're ready for more students after that. So at this point, the savings, the estimated cost to get this done, let me see, would include 1 teacher for $81,000, $81,010. That would be the total cost, including benefits. 4 ed techs, 1 for each student, at $31,473 each, times 4. So that would equal $125,892. And support 5 to 7 hours per week for BCBA, and materials set up about $5,000. So the estimated total cost would be $211,902, and estimated cost funded locally would be $206,902. And in doing that, I'm sorry, I'm at my last page here. This was quite an important meeting, and we had a lot of information. The savings overall would be $13,098. So that's the overall savings. Now, it's not a large amount, but it's a beginning, and the more students we have, the more savings that we will reap as a result of that. So that is the concept, and I think, what did he say it would be, the placement would be? Walton School. Okay. I was very excited with this, so that's it. Thank you. Oh, and I wanted to mention, before I forget, the Auburn Middle School Boys Alpine second place, hooray, and the Auburn Middle School Girls Alpine team are in third place, made third place. And the library auction committee is underway for this year's auction and fundraising. Everyone's fundraising. Good luck to all of us.
Very good. And before I go on, I forgot to mention one thing. I'll be speaking tomorrow in front of the Auburn Business Association's monthly meeting at Gippers. Starts around 5:30, social hour, and then dinner. I encourage everyone, not just business people, to attend. So at that point, I'll be updating on the Sesquicentennial, the quality of our water, agriculture ordinance, the high school, a little bit. And I think there's probably some Q&A that will be there too. So y'all might want to go and learn a little bit about water.
Just briefly, normally we'd have an airport meeting Thursday night, but it will not be, so our next meeting will be a month from Thursday night. I did mention AVCOG earlier meeting last Wednesday. I think it would behoove us to invite AVCOG and maybe particularly the small business division to come before us and really address programs that they have supporting, well, farm business as well as forestry issues, recognizing, too, the AVCOG administers Northern Woods funds. So I think it would be important to see if some of those funds might be appropriate for application here in Auburn.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On tomorrow at 8 a.m., the Strategic Planning Committee Advisory Committee, can't remember what that's called, but anyway, we'll be meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to continue the work of helping to advise the process, which continues. On Tuesday evening at 5:30, the BEL Building Committee will be meeting till 6:45, and there's not a joint meeting on Wednesday, correct? Just the so that will be a chance to hear about some of the new proposals that are being made. And on Wednesday at 6 p.m., I'll be at the West Auburn Neighborhood Watch to speak about the strategic plan, about the Mayor's Ag Committee, about the new high school, but not about water.
Should. That's the right neighborhood. They care.
Eventually.
Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add on to what Councilor Walker was saying. Tomorrow we have an age-friendly meeting at 5:30. We're looking for anybody that would like to come. They're more than welcome to show up. It starts at 5:30 at the Auburn Senior Center. And we're also looking for people to join our committee so they can fill out, take an application offline or ask one of us and we'll give them a copy and they'll fill it out. And we can consider their placement on our committee.
Good. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments. One, the 150th anniversary activities are continuing with Memorial Day Parade coming up, and we're looking for participants for the parade. So for those who have an interest in that, please go to auburn150.com. The folks involved are doing a great job, Jody DeRisco and Councilor Fournier and the other folks that are involved in that process. The finance director earlier mentioned that we are moving ahead with the FY20 budget. We will be coming to you this month with presentation. And I also want to mention, based on the discussion this evening, I'd be happy to invite Sid Hazelton, the superintendent for Auburn Water and Sewer, to come and give a presentation and provide information, answer questions. And if you're agreeable to that, I can reach out to him and give him a call. And lastly, on the strategic plan, just to follow up on what Councilor Lasagna said, and I'd like to have Phil speak to this. He's done such a great job with it, with Lizelle and the other folks who have been involved. This has been a team effort. We've had a lot of staff involved and people from the community and councilors and the mayor, and this is a very dynamic process, and we continue to move forward with it. Phil?
I would just add that tomorrow is going to be an exciting day for the Strategic Planning Committee. They'll be working on prioritization of all the work that was done by the subcommittees and the breakout groups. And the Investment Committee had their first meeting last week. And so they will also, on March 14th, will be the next investment subcommittee meeting here at City Hall at 6:30. And I encourage people to come, I'm sorry, 6 p.m. Encourage people to come and attend and be part of that process and see the work that they're going to be doing. Thanks.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much. I'm not going to entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. Second open session.
Open session.
We'll open this up, the last open session to the members of the public. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? If so, 3 minutes, name, address, birthday, social security number.
I'm Mary Sylvester still, and I still live at 208 Maple Hill Road. I think this is an appropriate time simply to say I am also, having been appointed by council in my second year as a trustee of the Auburn Water District, and I'm a little surprised to hear that we seem to have some communications problems since the trustees are totally operating with transparency. Some of the questions that have been asked about the alum and how this might work are things that we as trustees are filled in on a regular basis so that we can be knowledgeable. We believe strongly that we act on behalf of the public in ensuring public water, and are open to every question that has ever come up. People sometimes from the community come and ask to our public meetings and speak at public session and ask questions where they have questions and concerns, and those are taken respectfully and seriously. I can certainly see that there is a need for a stronger link when complicated questions of safe water, affordable water, come before the whole community. The council needs to understand this as fully as the trustees do. And I think we can learn something from the current confusion that I watched you all have about reports that you haven't received. I think Sid, our superintendent, will be very forthcoming. I know he will be. He is deeply committed professional. This is what he does for a living. So I look forward to every opportunity that we can find. I don't speak officially tonight on behalf of the trustees, since this is a surprise to me, frankly, that there is this level of disconnect. But I felt I needed to speak as one of the trustees, albeit a newer one, that there is a complete commitment for a completely open process and to work in behalf of everyone. And council certainly should be more closely. We do have a run of your representatives, and perhaps there's a way to strengthen how the content of the trustee meetings gets reported to council, so that some of the nuances of the science and the reporting and the data that we're looking into is shared with you in some other ways as well. So I think these should be the first of many conversations about how to strengthen that link. These are really both important and complex issues as we feel a very strong responsibility to provide safe, affordable drinking water through a somewhat antiquated pipe system, which needs to be also on our agendas, because we are now in about a 60-year time frame to get very old pipes replaced. And every time there's a break, there's a big problem. So these are complicated and expensive issues, and public water is on the list of things we shouldn't ever take for granted. So thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the public who'd like to speak? None being, I'll close this open session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion for Councilor Fournier, a second for Councilor Hayes. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? None. 6-0. We are now adjourned.